It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, February 25th. This is a regular meeting of the Bellbrook Board of Education. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated on the agenda item. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Rodney, please call the roll. Sorry to put that out of order, didn't I?
Okay, Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
Mrs. Dorn?
Here.
Mrs. Long?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Sloughtman?
Here.
All right, please go ahead with the treasurer's report.
Okay, could I get a motion to approve a new student activity account for Bell Creek Intermediate called Beach Bash, which is number 018-9000.
So moved.
Mrs. Sloughtman,
Second.
Mrs. Doran. So
It's a
we do this on our oceanfront property.
Right. It's a fundraiser for Bell Creek Intermediate, and they've had it for years, but it's been intermingled with the principal's activity account. They would like to separate it out into its own fund, and even student activity accounts. Now the auditor is saying we need to have the board pass a resolution for those to be established. So.
Okay. Any questions, comments? All right, call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
Mrs. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughtman?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Look at a motion to approve an advance, which is a loan, in the amount of $13,656.08 from the general fund to the Title 6B Federal Special Education Grant until the federal government reimburses us for expenditures we've made.
Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. Dorn. So this isn't really any different from every other advance that we do in order to keep that out of the red at the end of the month.
We
Okay.
may be having one of these about every month, the way that they're tightening down on and everything.
Okay.
Do this.
Any questions or comments? Okay, go ahead. Call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughtman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes.
Can I get a motion to approve the amendments to fiscal year 21 appropriations in the amount of minus $108,970.37 as listed with the agenda? This is basically to reduce revenues that we had predicted for the athletic fund and some changes in federal grants.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. Dorn. So this is a reduction in revenue. I don't want to see that.
Hopefully it's included there. I didn't look to see the list. Oh, maybe I didn't include it. That's good. Well, it's about 4 federal grants that they
Okay.
changed their allocation. So if we had budgeted the $100,000 was allocated for a grant,
Mhm.
a lot of times they change by $25 or something, and I have to change the budget because we can't budget more than the allocation.
Okay.
So there are about 4 federal grants with small changes and then one big change to the athletic fund because we obviously aren't going to bring in the revenue that we anticipated a year ago
Mhm.
because of COVID and those kind of things.
Any questions or comments? All right, please call the roll.
Okay, Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughtman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mrs. Dorn.
Yes.
motion passes.
And then the last one I have is I need a motion to approve the tax rates as set by the Greene County Budget Commission, setting our bond retirement rate at 4.31 mils. And this is for next fiscal year, the 21-22 fiscal year.
Okay.
So moved. Second.
Mrs. Sloughman and Mrs. Dorn.
It's also a reduction of 1/10 of a mil, for what that's worth.
I'll say it's nice at least a reduction as compared to an increase. All right. Any questions or comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes,
Mrs. Dorn?
Yes.
Mrs. Long?
Yes.
motion passes. Board members have any correspondence since our last meeting a couple weeks ago to share? Okay, we'll go on to reports to the board. Mr. Romali. Mr. Romali is our district representative to the Greene County Joint Vocational School Board, and he attended their most recent meeting and is going to provide an update for us. Thank you very much for being here.
Yes, I attended the meeting on 10 February of this year
yeah.
at 5:30.
Adam.
Yeah.
You
Oh, I'm sorry.
want him up front,
Microphone?
Josh,
Yeah,
is that
sorry.
better?
It's picking them up either way.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Morale, do you want to come up here a little bit so you can be seen on the screen?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, back there,
No,
not there,
there's
right there.
cameras over there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I got a face for radio. So anyway, I attended the Greene County Christian School Board meeting on 10 February. Meeting started at 5:30. Started off with approval of several policies, none of which rise to any sort of concerning level. They did approve the College Credit Plus agreements with Sinclair Community College as well as Clark State College.
Good.
They had a discussion about vaccinating the GCC staff, and the first dose of the Pfizer Moderna, either one of those, was administered on 5 February. The second dose will be administered to the staff tomorrow, 26 February, for those with the Pfizer, and on 5 March for those who took the Moderna. We then have reports from each of the individual school representatives. Beaver Creek representative informed the group that they had the tax levy on the ballot as well, so they're in for exciting times as well. Cedarville, COVID had a big impact on their staff, and they were just getting back to returning to normalcy now. I did let them know from the Bellbrook perspective about our upcoming levy. Greenview had a large percentage, about 51 of 100 students that were going to be attending the Career Center next year, so they had a big turnout and taking advantage of the opportunities out there. The Career Center also had an open house in the past, and this is the first time they ever had an open house. And so this year they had about 2,000 people show up, and they were very pleased with that from the standpoint of more than he had ever had. So they expect to do that again next year. And that closed the general session of the meeting.
All right,
Any questions, I guess? I'm sorry, I'm new at this.
that's all right. We're new at getting a report like that too, so
I'll try and be more consistent with it.
no, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. So the plan is for, when we do our quarterly meetings like this, for us to get an update like that. And if there's, I guess, if you could double check with me maybe a week before the Career Center meeting,
Yes.
and then maybe we can communicate some information to them also, and you're not kind of left out there of what to share, that I can give you maybe a couple things that are going on. that
That'd
you
be
can share
great.
with
Yeah,
them.
I'll reach out to you via email, and compare notes and make sure that I get the right message to the Greene County Career Center. Yes.
That'd be great. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, thank you. All right, the performance audit. I'm assuming that's you, Dr. Kozad?
Yeah. So we're going to have an update on performance audit, and you guys have the board has a copy of the presentation up there. And also it's extremely similar to what's in your packet also. So just to kind of give you some more background, so this is the 2020 performance audit that the State Auditor's Office did for us. It's a performance audit. And so, going to the next slide there, Mr. Bowles. So again, it was completed in January of 2020. They had been working for about 6 months with us on it. There was no cost to the district. It's normally about $80,000, but because of our financial situation, they chose us to do a performance audit. So normally it's about $80,000. And so what they did, they compared our budget and our items and so forth, our workings to peer school districts. And so that are districts that are around the state that are similar to us in size, demographics, budgets, and so forth. So that was a peer districts, local districts, or those that are really surrounding us, and then obviously the state. So those are as they looked at our information, they compared us to those three different areas, depending on, not for every single one, but they chose either the peer, local. They usually did the state for everyone. And what they found out is, again, this was a whole board meeting in January. Obviously, we're not going to go through the whole report tonight. It is on the state auditor's site. It is on our website. Everything is out there. But one of their conclusions, due to an already lean budget, the auditors found it very challenging to find many areas to reduce without striking at the core of our schools, forever changing the well-rounded experience and high-caliber educational experience our students deserve, our community expects. So, I think Mr. Liming at some point said it'd be really good if they found stuff, and it'd be really bad if they found stuff. And really, because they found stuff, I mean, we could have some savings. We could have a substantial amount of savings. If they didn't find stuff, that's probably good also, because that means we're already doing those things that we're supposed to be doing. And it was the latter, that we're already doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, and we already have a lean budget, and it gets leaner. And so, and just also another reminder, recommendations that they made, they're non-binding. So it isn't like we have to do any of those things, but they're suggestions, they're recommendations. And so we can move on to them. So we're going to quickly go through these 12 recommendations, and Mrs. Sigmund has a report on a couple of them. So let's quickly go through these, and just to give you an update on these. So the first one had to do with purchasing Chromebooks. We have Chromebooks for all of our kids in our schools. And so this recommendation was to push that off, so that essentially for this one, we would never purchase those Chromebooks. And so that's a savings of $250,000 annually. Well, again, that sounds great, but at some point we have to replace some computers for our students. So this is more of a push-off savings. It's a one-year savings, because at some point we have to purchase some computers. And so right now we push it off for this year. We're planning on purchasing some computers in 22-23 school year. And at that point, those devices will be 5.5 or 6.5 years old at the time they're replaced. And for a computer, that's pretty old. For a Chromebook, that's really old for a Chromebook. They're just not as powerful. But you know what? We bought some really solid ones. They've lasted a long time. If you have kids, they throw around stuff. They toss it wherever. So overall, I mean, they've held up really well. But as they get near their end life, it's going to be really challenging to keep all those things up and running. And so we're looking, in the long run here, as we're looking out there, we're not sure if we're going to lease them or if we're going to purchase them. So Mr. Bowles has just been kind of dipping his toe in the water on looking at those things. Is it better to lease? Better to purchase? And so we're going to figure those things out as we move along. Any questions on that before we move to number 2? Okay. Number 2, better plan for large capital purchases. The district should develop and implement a formal multi-year capital plan. Again, we're still in the process of putting this fully together. Of big substantial projects like additions or new buildings or those things, we just don't see those things in our future. We have space in our buildings, probably, and I don't want to lock myself into this number, but probably up to 500 kids. If they were, spread evenly throughout, there's not like this big, bubble somewhere. But we have room in our buildings to allow for some growth. And as you're on the community, there is building going on of homes in a few areas. So again, there's nothing out there in our mind that in the near future we need to be worrying about building or additions or anything like that. Some of the big things that are out there, our roofs, they've all been replaced. They're all under warranty still. We're really in great shape on our roofs, and that's really important, because those things can be hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace roofs. And so the district is in a great position for that. But there's nothing else out there as a huge job like that. And I know maybe the preventive maintenance program a little bit, we'll talk about some other things. But any questions for that? Again, that's a combination. We're trying to, look at our permanent improvement money and see if those things can be used for any type of capital improvements. But again, we're still putting that process together. We're working on it, but we're still putting it together. Recommendation number 3 essentially is saying pay to play for extracurricular activities. So any type of extracurricular activity, whatever it costs, the students need to pay for those, whether they're athletics or any activities or so forth. So they looked at, that's the number compared to totally getting rid of the subsidy is what they called it, out of the general fund. We did raise fees this year for high school up to 300, middle school up to 200. And so they also looked at our local peers. And we were about $104,000 off from them. So we were spending about $104,000 more than them, their local peers. And so through those raising of fees, we were slated to save about $95,000. So there may be still a little gap there, but we're moving closer with those addition of those fees of closing that gap a little bit. But from my perspective of trying to get rid of that whole subsidy is going to be hugely detrimental to our extracurriculars, our sports, our clubs, and so forth, and really make it out of reach for a lot of our students. So go ahead. Yeah.
Do we have any of our local community organizations step up to help any students cover those increased costs, or do we see decreased participation at all with that change in fees?
I don't have the numbers of decreased participation. I don't think it's wildly negative decrease overall. But anytime, if there's a student that needs some help, I know through the principals, through the athletic directors, they find either the Lions Club or somebody else that will help fund those students. Or there's some type of payment plan. There's something to work out for those students that need a little extra help, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that was a concern.
One comment or question for the difference that we said we're comparing us to our local peers or local communities. Those are adjusted for school size too, or are they or not?
They were not adjusted for school size.
Okay.
I don't think they were they?
No, but
No.
also we cut 85 positions in the.
Correct.
True.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Thank
That
you.
reduced the whole.
Okay. Thanks.
I had that written down here and I didn't see it. Thank you for reminding me.
That's a big one.
Yes, that is a big one.
Yes, it was.
So 95,000 plus the 85 supplementals, actually we're over that 104. That kind of that gap there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, bigger school districts, obviously they can have a lot more kids for things and so forth. So number 4, number 5, and I'm going to group number 4 and number 5 together. Essentially was they call it one technical position at central office, one technical district position, and 0.5 central office support. And so that was what number 5 was, a reducing by those this school year, and then also reducing by 0.5 career tech, 1 counselor, 0.5 library, and 1.5 nurses. Again, so when they do those, they don't take into consideration building configuration, those kind of things, which really has an impact on kind of those numbers. So when you pair those two together, and hindsight being 2020, what would the world have looked like if we had said we were going to cut 1.5 nurses for this school year? I mean, we would have been really struggling.
Or IT support.
Or IT support, counselors.
Yeah,
So, it's great to look at facts and figures and numbers, but when push comes to shove on some things, sometimes it's okay to spend the money on those kind of things, especially when you never know, worldwide pandemic, but still, I mean, those folks are extremely critical. Nurses, we have a lot of high needs medical kids, and so the service that they provide is just extremely instrumental in the running of our school district. So you put 4 and 5 together, and then you go all the way back to, or go all the way down to recommendation number 12, which I would call the catch-all recommendations. So for recommendation 1 through 11, all the recommendations were to try to get us to $0 and not a negative balance at the end of the 5-year forecast. So recommendations 1 through 11, whatever had to be made up, they just did it in recommendation number 12. It's just kind of the catch-all, the residual. And so, but if you put together recommendations 4 and 5 and recommendation 12, that's about $1.85 million of savings that they recommended for us. And we actually, during this time, we cut about $2.5 million. We cut about, overall since 2018, we cut 33 positions, 17 of them certified, 11% of our staff since 2018. So they were recommending 1.8, we actually cut 2.5, which is obviously above and beyond what they had recommended. Again, not in necessarily the areas that they said, but again, depending on your configuration, how things are, sometimes that's just not feasible to be able to do that. It's just, every district is different of what people do what. Any questions on that? Okay. Recommendations 6 and 7 have to do with renegotiating collective bargaining agreements, saving $196,000 for 6 and $12,006 on number 7. We have not negotiated a contract since this summer it came out. So, this is the end of a 3-year contract for both SEA and SLASP. And that's our classified union. So, anytime we negotiate, everything is on the table. So that I'm just not going to go into any more detail of that, but, you can't just in the middle of a contract, renegotiate those kind of things. So, again, those are conversations we can certainly have when it comes time at the end of our contract. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Mrs. Sigmund, I'll finish up and then I'll hand it over to you. You can do both of them. Okay. Recommendation 8, bus replacement. Mrs. Sigmund's going to talk about that in a minute. Recommendation 9 has to do with Sugar Creek Elementary. So right now we're losing just a little bit of money on that, and so at some point in the near future, we need to seriously think about what we're going to do with the Sugar Creek Elementary. Mm-hmm. So, it's not a conversation for tonight, but that's a conversation we need to start thinking about of what are we going to do with that elementary school. Right now, in the main building, there's a church in there and, other great community organizations. It's more of a community building. Mm-hmm. And then in the one story is the ESC rents that from us. And so we just need to think about what we're going to do with that building. And maybe at the end of the day, we're doing what we're doing right now. Or maybe at the end of the day, we're doing something else. But we just need to start thinking about what we would like to do with that building. Mm-hmm. Because it is, probably 80, 90-year-old building. It's a future liability for us. So we need to just start thinking about that. Any questions about that?
I think anything we do with that does need to involve the community. Yes, technically it's the school's building, but it's the community's building. And I think the township and the city and all will have to say. And,
there's a gymnasium in there, correct?
Yeah, there is.
the church now.
Yeah, that's where the church.
Gymnasium.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They made a beautiful sanctuary.
And they allow community organizations, like they've had some community meetings in there as well.
And they have 2 or 3 rooms in the first
The
floor?
church has the whole lowest floor. They have if you haven't been in there, go in there. They really renovated, done a nice job with it. It's really pretty.
Yeah.
And the second floor is all the community resource center now.
Right.
Daughter Community Support Center.
Mm-hmm.
And then the top floor has some scout groups using it and
Chamber of Commerce is in there as well.
Pardon me?
Chamber of Commerce? Are they
not
still in there?
they moved out.
Okay.
They could not afford the rent.
Okay, and then recommendation number 11, formal purchasing process. Again, for that, we're following board policy with those formal purchasing processes. And as every contract expires, and some of those are in the preventive maintenance program or presentation that Ms. Sigmund's going to review for us. We either look at those of every contract, if they're a multi-year contract, look and see if we get a better deal. We're looking at those on a yearly basis and trying to see if we can get better deals. So that's an ongoing thing. We're following board policy as it goes with formal purchasing processes. Any questions on that? Okay, Mrs. Sigmund.
So that was a long introduction of this is real exciting stuff here. I'm
All right.
doing 8 and 10. So the first one is the facilities maintenance plan. And first of all, I just want to review facilities with you because you think of the school building, but it's way more than that. So, we have, I'm going to do by age. Sugarcreek Elementary is getting closing in on its 100-year celebration because it was built in 1925. So that's the 3-story building, and then you got the 1-story part of it that was built in 1956. 1956. Then you have what is now BCI, that was originally built as a high school in 1962. Then you have Stephen Bell, that was built in 1967. And then what is now the SEC, that was built as a junior high in 1960, that was 1967. Stephen Bell was 1964. And then the high school was built in 1997. And then you think of this building as being the new building, and it's going to be 15 years old this summer.
Wow.
So that, you think new building, it still looks brand new, but thanks to the people I'm going to be talking about. But, it's a 15-year-old building. And then we also have what you may not, have you not been back there, we have the transportation center, it was built in 2008. We have the stadium, which includes the concession stands, the field houses, the storage barns. You have the athletic fields and the dugouts. You have the cross-country course. And then you have all the parking lots and roadways and fencing in our district. That's all run and maintained by a department of 4 people.
Wow.
And that is small. When the auditors came in, they were shocked at the size of our maintenance department. We used to have 2 other part-time people. One who did some electrical work for us as needed. Unfortunately passed away this year, Dick Pape. And then we have Rich Martin that kind of took care of HVAC stuff for us, and he's moved to Florida and finally decided to step away from that as well. So we have not replaced those people. So we have 4 maintenance people. Tom Fryman is our maintenance supervisor. And then we have 2 that are here all winter long or with him throughout the year. And then we have a 4th person that does spring, summer, fall, because he mainly takes care of the grounds. And does all the mowing, you'll see him out on the tractor and so on. And in addition to our 4 maintenance, we have 17 custodians in all the buildings. And we do not have subs. I'm just telling you right now, we do not have custodian subs. So if I have a custodian out for a week, the only people we have are maintenance people are covering the sub jobs. So, when there's a maintenance person off, then we're down to 2 people on maintenance. So what they do is fantastic. I'm just going to say that right now. We are so lucky to have them. So the purpose of this plan is what we've already been doing, but it's just formalizing it maybe, making sure we're consistent in all the buildings. We want to identify what the maintenance needs are, and the whole point of this is to have safe buildings, healthy buildings, efficient buildings, no disruption to our educational programs, and mainly just to protect our public investment in these facilities, because we're the ones paying for these buildings, so we want to protect them. So the things that we take into consideration with our maintenance is the age of the facilities and equipment, the building use, not just by our schools, but by the community, as seen by the parking lot when you came in tonight. In a normal non-pandemic year, most of our buildings are used 7 days a week till late at night. So the community, this is the community pays for these buildings, the community uses these buildings. The other thing we got to look into is building equipment design, building codes, advances in technology. Just for example, I don't think any of you were on the board at the time. When we had the energy audit came in here, we were the first school district in the state of Ohio to switch to all LED lighting, which has saved us a ton of money with electrical costs. We also look at conditions of building and the service standards. So those are the things that we're taking into consideration in this plan. There's really 3 levels of maintenance. You have your custodians who are in your buildings on a daily basis. They do minor preventive maintenance. They take care of minor repairs. They're doing furnace filters or what have you, but there are eyes and ears of what the needs are. So it's their job to do their daily checks in all area and then notify the maintenance department if there's an issue right away that they need to deal with. So again, we protect their dollars. If they see a leak, we don't just ignore it. We call maintenance right away and get them over here to fix it. And then you have your maintenance department, and our maintenance department is cross-trained in multiple trades. So it's not like, Tom does all the plumbing work and Ray does all the electrical work. They're cross-trained, which is great because, again, we're so short-staffed, we might need to call them to go deal with something. I was texting Tom today, I need you to go down to Sugarcreek Elementary and take care of a situation right away, and he did. So they can do multiple things. And then the last thing is you have your contracted services. For example, Cincinnati Flooring comes in and refinishes our gym floors every summer. That's just a level of expertise and equipment that our district can't afford to buy for the time that you need. So we contract things like the floor refinishing, bleacher repairs. Our custodians do some minor things, but if a motor goes out in the electronic bleachers, we call in our bleachers. And then you have your fire suppression systems, your extermination, and that kind of thing. So we have contracted services for that. So that's the whole layers of it. So what this plan does, and you have a copy of your packet, you can see the charts in the back. This just gives you an idea of who the jobs are assigned to. So you first have your building custodial staff. You can see those are all the things they do, if you look at that chart, on a regular basis to make sure our buildings are safe and maintained and protecting our tax dollars, that we're not having an issue. Then you have the maintenance department, their regular checklist is in the next page. So I'm not going to go through all those. I mean, if you're like me, I don't even know what some of this stuff means necessarily, I know like the other day I got a report, we have to do this flushing the valves test every year, and we have to report it back to the sanitation department. But things like that, that's all in this plan, and that's what our departments do. But this does clarify, so the custodian says, well, that's not my job. Yes, it is. Here it is in the plan, and it's your job to do what have you that's on this chart. So that's what this does, is it just makes it comprehensive so we're consistent from building to building and that we're not missing any areas. For example, we had the whole thing with Legionnaire's disease and other communities, other schools. One of our maintenance things every year is to flush all the water lines. Those things, areas you don't think of, like those eye wash stations in the high school and the middle school. Someone needs to flush those lines every summer, make sure that we're getting the water going through. So that's all part of this plan. And as Doug's alluded to, you have your contracted services. I listed, this is probably not comprehensive, but in this plan, it's listed the ones that we use regularly. Some of those are contracts and some of those are just as needed. And we will look at that. For example, we use waste management right now. When our contract's up, we'll look at bids from Rumpke and Waste Management, what have you, and all the sources. We're always going to look for who can give us the best deal, but not just best deal, but they got to meet our needs in our facilities. For example, the HVAC system is a very complicated system. And so you need someone who's familiar with our system versus someone coming in and living in a cold too. So those are things we've taken into consideration. Lastly, the one thing that we added this year is that our work order process. When I started this job, I saw these work orders coming in 16 different ways. Phone calls, text, sitting an email, written on triplicate paper, sitting on hard paper, just Post-it notes. Grab Tom in the hallway. That was our, our work order process. So we have gone through an electronic process it's through Public School Works, which we already are using as a district. So it didn't cost us any money to switch to this. But now all our custodians submit work orders on the same way through the computer, and then it has to go through the building principals before it goes to the maintenance department. And again, because that's one more check for the principal to say, no, you can do this as a custodian. We don't need the maintenance department to do this. So we're consistent there. But then it goes to the maintenance department. But what is nice about this is then Tom can reply and say, parts are on order. So that we're not keep calling them saying, hey, did you see my work order that this toilet needs fixed? Yes, we saw it. The parts are on order. We'll have it be 2 weeks. The other reason that's nice about it, like for example, the elevator here, you may not know we have an elevator in the middle school, but we do. It goes to the stage. It wasn't working. So this was back when I was principal. We had to call in someone to fix it. And Tom did and got it fixed. I didn't know that the repairman had been here to fix it. I didn't see him come in that day. Then it's not working again. So I'm like, why didn't they fix that elevator? And meanwhile, Tom doesn't know it's broke again because I just didn't know it had gotten repaired and it's broke again. I just thought it had never been repaired. So with this process, doing the electronic order, Tom can say it's been repaired. The principal can log on and see that job's been done. So now if it's broken again, we know to do another work order. So there was things like that just with such a small department and people grow, doing that, this is gonna make that a lot more consistent. I mean, the poor guys, their phones are ringing nonstop on the phone. Get here, and everybody's need is more important than everybody else's. So this way it can get prioritized, and I can see them myself and see where we are with all the work order process. But I will say, I'm just gonna tell you guys, this plan will keep us all official, consistent, building to building. But I'm telling you right now, this district's getting a big bang for the buck from our maintenance department that is extremely understaffed. So I hope our community appreciates the fact that they're maintaining, look at how nice these buildings are on a small staffing budget. Okay, so there's the comprehensive maintenance plan for educational facilities. Now go into the fleet replacement plan. See, I'm checking on 2 of your things tonight.
And we appreciate that.
I'll get the capital improvement one, the next one.
There you go.
Okay. The comprehensive plan for fleet replacement of buses and other student transportation vehicles. We actually, in our fleet, you may not realize that our transportation department, besides buses and vans, you have pickup trucks, you have box trucks, you have dump trucks, you have bobcats, you have all those things that our transportation department mechanics are servicing. But I'm only going to talk about things that are transporting students. Okay. First of all, if you're not aware of our department, we have Jacob Wilhite, who you just hired a month and a half ago. New in the job, his first day without Bev Wetzel, we had a 2-hour delay. His second day on the job without Bev Wetzel, we had a snow day. So he's really got his feet wet quick. We have Michelle Main, who's also in that department with him as the secretary. And then we have Mark Linkart, one of the best bus mechanics in the state of Ohio. I put him up against anybody. He saves us a ton of money because he keeps our buses running. And then TJ Longhorn is our other bus mechanic, same thing. He's learning from the best as well. There's things that we do within the transportation department that our community may not realize that we do to keep our buses running for as long as possible. For example, you might rotate buses that are on like the long distant routes that put more mileage on a route. The next year it'll be a different bus doing that, so we can keep the mileage more level on buses the same age. Buses that go out on field trips to Eaton, Ohio, for example, or what have you, we will rotate those buses again to try to keep the mileage as consistent across all the buses of that age group. Again, we do preventative maintenance. If you go back to our garage, you will see it all written out. They have everything logged, oil changes, filter changes, what have you. Our buses are maintained, and the record keeping is wonderful. Now, our current fleet, we have 28 buses, 24 are regular, 4 are handicapped. Of those 28, 22 are used on daily routes, so we have 6 spares right now. We had 9, and I just sold 3 of them. One of them is going to become a restaurant on wheels in LA, and another one's going to become a camper in Beaver Creek, and the third one was, I just picked it up yesterday. So I just sold 3. We may sell a couple more of these spares if we think we can get by on less spares. Because even though the spares, they do cost us some money when they sit on the lot, because you got to keep starting them and making sure they're running and so on. But we need a few spares. Vans, we have 5 of them. Note the ages of the vans when you look on there. One is 24 years old. One more year we can put it in classic car shows. We have a 20-year-old van. We have a 15-year-old van, an 8-year-old van, and our new van that's 6 years old. Okay. Our vans transport kids during the day and after school hours. We have, for example, the community may not realize if we have a student who becomes homeless and moves in with his aunt and uncle, he and his mother or whatever, move with their aunt and uncle in another town or another county even, we have to transport that student back here. So we will use a van to go pick up that student that might be living in New Carlisle or Springfield or what have you, and transport here. So we use vans for things like that. We have a student we transport to Columbus because he attends a special school up there. So those are the types of things that we'll use a van for instead of a bus. We also use vans for some of our athletic teams, the golf team, for example, or the tennis team, or they can have their 9-passenger vans that can have 7 students and 2 coaches on. Okay, so our industry standards. For a bus, we should be replacing them when they are 12 to 15 years old or have 150 to 200,000 miles on them. Of the 22 we are currently running on daily routes, 11 follow under replacement now. So that's worse than the number that was in the plan because we're a year older. And we didn't buy any buses. That was one of our savings or cuts as we delayed purchases of buses. So we have 11 that we should be replacing. Now, if you look on the plan, there's a chart in the very back. I'm not going to review it here now, but this chart here will show you the age of all our buses, what we paid for them when we bought them, and the type of bus. They're all 72 passenger buses plus the handicap buses. So the handicap buses are in yellow, and then the ones that are pink are the ones that are currently not in use on regular routes. Okay? Now, to read my wonderful little signature, when you look out and you'll see an X-15, that's when I propose that we sell that, we buy a new bus to replace that 15-year-old bus. Or if we see X-16, that means that bus will be 16 years old when we replace it. Now, the reason we want to do a plan like this is to, one, be planning ahead our dollar numbers, what are we going to have money to buy these buses for. But the other thing is we also want to prevent having to do what we had to do at one point. If you see, we purchased 10 buses in 2008. Well, those 10 buses should then all be replaced at the same time. That's a big ticket item. So I broke it down to 2 years, but that's why you have 5 buses be 16 years old before we replace them. I trust Mark in keeping them running. Our mechanic can keep a bus running. But what a mechanic cannot do is prevent the bus from rusting. And the salt on the roads kill the chassis on these buses. If we had a transportation center with a wash bay on it, so every day when we brought those buses in with salt on the road and we could wash them off, that would make the life a little longer on them. We don't have that here. And so the salt really hurts these buses. So that's why we need to replace them, is for the rust, not because the engines aren't working anymore. But you do reach a point, sometimes you're putting more money in the bus than what it's worth. I mean, just to give you an idea, when I sold those 3 buses, we do them on an auction site. A 15-year-old bus will sell for anywhere from $3,000 to $5,500, $3,000 to $5,500. You're not getting rich off selling buses. Okay, so you got the plans spelled out there. You can see why each year why I look to replace them. How we go about it is we do get bids through our Southwest EPC. And we will get the best prices. But there's things to look at when we're talking about the bids for the buses. I'm going to tell you to consider down the road when we're all looking at this, is you don't want to just always go with the cheapest price, because we like to have models that are similar to buses we already own, because when Mark has to buy all these parts or replacement and the knowledge to fix them, it's much better when your buses are all similar engines, so to speak, and brands. So that's one of the things we need to consider when we look into it. The other thing we look into is there are grants that come up periodically from the state or from a federal organizations. We apply for every grant that we can, but there's always caveats. Like you might get funding, but it's never for a whole bus. Like we got a grant this year, but we got $24,000. That's not going to buy a bus. So you still have to come up with the other 75% of that cost of that bus, what have you. So, there's some of those grants you got to be careful with. Yeah, you can get a grant to buy 3 buses, but it's only going to pay for $25,000 for each of those buses. So those are things we look at. So that's what this plan is, just spreading out our bus purchases, getting through, and I did it as far out to 2030. So you can just get an idea as a board what we're going to be needing to spend money on with bus replacements. Now, I'm going to just say this for any public lady who's listening to this exciting thing as well. Just because we have a plan that says we're going to replace 5 buses in such and such year, we're not stuck to this, and we may not be able to do it because we may not have the funding for it. As an example, we made our last cuts. We were due to buy a bus, we didn't do it. So this is just a suggested plan to keep it consistent, but again, funding's always going to be our concern that we got to make sure we can take care of as well. So those are my 2 presentations for you.
Thank you very, very
Any
much.
questions?
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Yes.
Mrs. Sigmund does a fantastic job putting all those things together, and I would agree with her of the maintenance staff, the custodians, mechanics, transportation. They do just a fantastic job, and on a tight budget and a small number of them. So they do a fantastic job. I think that crackling was for me to pick up my mic. Reminder. We go to the next. So really that is, so if, go back please, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Let's go back one more. So if you were checking them off like I was, as we were going through these, of the things that we have addressed, so really the only ones that, again, these are ongoing things also, but the one thing that we really still need to be working on is number 2. That's the capital purchase plan. We're already working on that, but we aren't quite complete with that done. Again, we could use some permanent improvement dollars with those things too. And then if you go to the next page, recommendation 9, Sugar Creek Elementary. So really, all those other recommendations that are, again, non-binding from the state auditor's office for performance audit, I said, here are the things that you can do to help out your financial situation. We have done, 10 of the 12 already. And like I said, number 2, we're working on that. And number 9, I agree with Mrs. Dorn that we need to have a public conversation about that and get some input from folks before we just do that or do anything with that building. So
6 and 7 are still pending, you said.
I'm sorry, 6 and 7, yes, thank you. Sorry, 6 and 7 are still pending. Thank you. You were checking them off. Thank you. Keep me honest over here. Thank you. Is there anything else that I missed? Very good.
Oh,
So,
you're good.
yep, 6 and 7 are ones that we're going to address, but whenever you're negotiating, you never know where you're going to end up at the end there. So going to the next slide here, just to finish up here. So the performance audits, those were all the 12 recommendations that they had recommendations for, but also, and I remember saying this last year when we were going through it, I think it's also extremely important to note the things that they didn't have recommendations on, because the whole purpose was for us to try to save money so that we would have a zero balance at the end of 5 years. So these are areas where, from my perspective, there wasn't any money savings because we were already right where we needed to be. And so that's salaries, certified and classified salaries, and central office and everybody else, medical insurance, transportation, staffing and maintenance and custodial, as we just discussed, administrative, general ed teachers, K-8 specials teachers, building clerical, and food service. So they didn't have any recommendations for that because we were right in line where we needed to be. Again, we continue to look at those things. If there's a cost savings that we can get, we definitely explore that and look at that. But I think those things are also important to know. Any questions about that? Okay, next slide, just as we can just quickly go through this. This is just kind of a history of where we're at, and in the past I've gone through each one of these, but the budget reductions, the levies that we've had on the ballot and so forth, all the way from 2018. So again, this was 2020. So this was January 2020. So all the things on that first slide are actually before the January 2020 of the reductions that we were making already to our budget. Mr. Bolton, go on to the next slide there. Again, the performance audit, the levy, phase 3 and 4 reductions, and then November 2020 levy. And so, I don't know if I said this earlier, but over $4.8 million in reductions since 2018. And obviously we have a 7-year 4.9, $3.22 million operating levy, emergency operating levy on the ballot. Any questions with that? Okay, and last slide there. Mr. Lyman I put that on there, but for more information, you can contact myself or Mr. Lyman. Option 5 and 2 for me, and option 5 and 3 for Mr. Lyman.
I appreciate the time to spend going over that and remind us how very disciplined and thorough we have been in managing the funding that we have and the needs that we have. We've made some very difficult choices along the way about some of these reductions that have impacted the students to a certain extent. We've really kept a lot of them out of the classroom, those cuts. But it makes me concerned for anything else that we would have to do is going to become particularly hard on the quality of the education that we can provide to our students. So I appreciate how we have progressed so far. Just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, again, we took those performance audit recommendations to heart, and if there's a place that we can improve, we're definitely going to look and improve and address those things. We definitely want to be the best stewards we can of our community's money. So if there's a place that we can improve on and do better, we'll do it.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Going on to board committee reports, the OSB legislative liaison is my role this year. So I had a handout for each of the board members. The first is the governor's report for investing in Ohio's future, looking at fiscal years 2022 and 2023. So this is a little bit down the road. I'm not going to go through all of that. I highlighted a few things just for your information, and all of this, of course, is available out on the web. You can get links to this through the OSBA, and you may already get Facts in the Flash, which has some of this information in it. But looking at page 2, investing in Ohio by enhancing our communities. The governor's proposal is to invest $250 million to provide grants to expand broadband access throughout Ohio, with the goal of ensuring that all households have the basic connectivity necessary to support children's homework, a job search, or online training. And that may not have as much of an impact on our community, but it certainly will in other areas of our region.
Yeah, just to speak to that, we did get a small grant for that, and again, trying to buy hotspots, and if there was some student or family that it was critical for them to have that internet access, we worked with them and tried to do the best we can with that. And again, I think for other communities, that need is much smaller, but it's still there. And I think that's important to note, though, it's still there. So
it is there.
We definitely are. If there's a need there, we will address it.
Also on page 2, growing a skilled workforce, the bulleted item on top of page 3, investing $16 million with the goal of helping high school students earn 70,000 workforce credentials each year. An additional $25 million investment is recommended to aid schools in offering new and high-demand credentials to students. And then also guarantee that every student in Ohio has access to computer science education, although that was the field of study when I was in college. Guaranteeing every student having access to computer science education looks like one of those underfunded or unfunded mandate kinds of things by the way that it's worded. Supporting K-12 learning, we must catch up kids who were left behind during the school closures. Fortunately, we were never completely remote for our school district this whole year. So that is a real plus for us. Investing in children allows us to strengthen our future workforce and economy. And boy, that's a message that we really need to make sure gets out to our community. That this isn't just an investment in somebody else's children. It's an investment in your own economic survival as a community. Page 4 has including a $1.1 billion in student wellness and success funds. So we would anticipate seeing some of that. And then appropriate additional funds to help kids catch up. Schools and districts will develop extended learning and learning recovery plans. Schools and districts will partner with community organizations to deliver extended learning and activities to targeted student populations. And it'll be interesting to see what proposals they have associated with that.
Yeah, just to speak to both those things, the student wellness thing. So we do receive a little bit of that money, but it's based on our 27% funding. Mm-hmm. So, if there's somebody that gets 50% funding from the state, they get twice as much as funding from us, or from the state for student wellness and success funds. And then the extended learning recovery plans, we are waiting for a little bit more guidance on that and trying to see what we need to do for the rest of the year and or in the summer. It's probably going to be in the summer for the most part, of how we're going to provide some intervention, close those gaps and so forth. And maybe it's a summer piece rather than the end of the year. I think we're already doing those. A lot of those things are ready. But we're waiting for a little bit more guidance before we get a little too far on that. But we are thinking through those things right now. It's just not a succinct plan. And hopeful, and I think they will allow us some flexibility on that, because what we need in our district might look extremely different than what Columbus City or Athens or somebody else looks like. So it should be very flexible to what you need in your community. Again, like you had said, this whole school year, we've had a couple of, a little bit of hybrid, but we've been in school all year. Other ones, they've been out all year remote. So, it can be a different dynamic from one district to the next.
And finally, on page 5, with 2,000 new scholarships in the Choose Ohio First scholarship program, prioritizing awards for underrepresented populations enrolled for critical STEM, STEMM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, math, and then they add medicine in that as well. It's just interesting to know. Then in the facts in a flash, updates from February 1st, 8th, and the 15th. There are some additional items in there regarding testing for the end of the school year and so forth, and I'll let you take a look through those at your own time.
Yeah, it definitely looks like we are testing. The state, I think, is trying to get away with the feds, and the feds are saying, well, you can shorten the test, or you can do it later, or you can do it in the summer. Well, the tests are coming out in about a month, so to shorten a test, a state test, it's just not practical for the state to pull that off. They're probably already mailing, paper tests. So we're proceeding on, in all of our grade levels that have those state tests. Like we're going to have it. We've been doing that all year. Just until somebody says differently, that's what we're planning on doing. Some other things to keep an eye on are Ed Choice, which is a nice code word for school choice and taking money away from public schools and putting it to private schools. And so that is this president of the Senate, Matt Huffman, it's his, for lack of a better term, that's his baby of wanting to do. So we're really concerned about that. And then also, I think I just read it today, of the state funding proposal is back at it. They thought it was dead, but state funding proposal has some legs, and they're working on that. So, conceptually, the state funding proposal sounds nice, looks great. However, when it comes down to the money that we get, it just doesn't solve any problems for us. So that's something. Those are two big things that we need to keep a very close eye on.
The funding is certainly a scenario where, if we're looking to the state to provide the funding that we need, then we're going to send the state dramatically more than what we'll get back, or and pay much more than what the need is if we took care of it locally.
Right.
We're much better off to take care of it locally.
Right. Again, just another note on the Green County superintendents. We met with our state reps. We meet with them twice a year. We met with Representative Dean, Representative Brian Lampton, and then State Senator Hackett. We met with them on last Friday. Again, those are the two things that we really brought up to them: the Ed Choice, charters, vouchers, those kind of things, and then the state funding proposals. So we advocated for them. They did a wonderful job listening, and we had a really good conversation with them. And what we really stressed to them is, before you go vote on something, because you're not education experts, come ask us. We'll give you our opinions, and at the end of the day, if you go some other direction, okay. But at least you become educated and not just vote along party lines. And that was our big stressor to them, of be educated, or ask us what our opinion, and just don't go into it blindly. And they at least said, okay, but Whether that really happens or not, I don't know, but they did a nice job listening to us. So again, we meet with them twice a year, so that's our spring meeting with them.
All right. Thank you. BSEF and Financial Advisor Audra, anything to report at this time?
Not a ton, I'll be very brief. The Financial Advisory Committee did meet last, was it Thursday night? Went over, obviously, relatively similar information that we go over, Mr. Lyman goes over during most of our board meetings, the current financial state of the district, the upcoming levy. And then Mr. Lyman also briefed us on some preliminary results he has received from the recent financial audit, which is separate from the performance audit that we just did. And
Right.
Kevin, you said you expect the final formal results within the month.
Yes, about a month.
But preliminary results were very favorable, in my opinion. And then as far as BSEF, not much to report because the first meeting that I'll be able to attend is literally tomorrow morning at 8. So I'll get back to you next time. There's some good things on the agenda, talking about the approval of spring grants, and then a new position that is going to be advertised here shortly for a fundraising and events coordinator for BSEF.
All right.
That's all I know. I'll know more tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Price, anything from the Safety Committee?
Just talking to Sigmund, Mrs. Sigmund, there is going to be a safety meeting in March, I believe, what the projection is. And at that time, I mean, one of the things I was really keenly interested in was improving the safety of our crosswalk situation. You know, like here on Feedwire, we have a sign that actually blocks the view of the sign, it tells you there's a crosswalk there. There's a lot of concern really with the lack of evidence, if that's a word, of our crosswalks with the lights. You know, they're not really as prominent as what I'd like them to be. Like when you're going to eat, try westbound on Feedwire in the morning, the yellow sun kind of washes out the yellow lights on the crosswalk sign and things like that. A random survey said when I just pushed the button and see how many people would stop when I went out about a year ago, found out about half the people could care less when you push that button. They aren't paying attention. So if you step one out there, it'll run you over. So I think part of it is that they're not, our crosswalk indicators are not as prominent as I'd like them to be. Unfortunately, there are federal standards which make sure they stay pretty incompetent. There's things you can look at and just say common sense. You know, we need a red light if someone's across the street. But no, you got to use yellow. The sunshine line washes out, but that's okay. It meets federal standards. So anyway, so we'll talk about some of these things, next month. The last time we were able to meet with the county engineer was literally a year ago, and obviously the COVID situation hit. And, so some of the things I was really quite keenly interested in seeing addressed, especially with respect to the crosswalk situation, just didn't get much. Well, the county engineer was very interested in what we had to say, but she made it very clear that, that unfortunately her hands are tied with respect to these federal guidelines with respect to road markings and things like that. But certainly things like moving the sign that blocks the other sign, things like that we can revisit. And so we'll do that meeting next month.
Thank you. And anything from the ESC Business Advisory, Mrs. Sluffman?
Very little. They're formulating a poll for students right now. Janesse, did you think of anything else? You've gone more than I have.
The big thing, they've started a program at Wright State for the super seniors. Meaning our special needs kids go to school age 21, and so they have a program out there now where students go on campus. So they're on Wright State's campus for half a day, and they go on job site half a day. This is their first year at that program. Our kids, our super seniors could go there. It costs money though, to send our students there, but it's a really neat program they're getting going, and they're trying to get some corporate sponsorship to help them out with that program. So that was one of the things she talked about.
All right. Our collaboration with the ESC has always been really good from my perspective. So that's Okay, the next is the OSBA workshop follow-up. Any comments or items that board members wanted to share as a result of having the session that we had with OSBA?
I do have one thing. During that, we called it a retreat or that workshop, we talked a little bit about efficiency of these meetings.
Mhm.
And I know recently in the last year, meetings that used to take an hour are now taking 3 or going late into the night. So I feel like there are things we do in our meeting that could be done more efficiently. I passed out, this is just publicly available information on consent agendas. If anyone listening wants to know what we're looking at, it's boardsource.org/resources/consent-agendas. I don't know if this board has ever considered utilizing a consent agenda.
We have not yet.
Okay.
But that's certainly something a number of schools do already.
Yeah. And basically for a lot of the things, particularly the January meetings where we spend a lot of time motioning and seconding and generally voting yes on a number of administrative matters, that particular meeting a lot, but at the beginning of every meeting, there are things that receive very little discussion or debate, and they're fairly routine. This would put them all on a somewhat separate agenda that we all could see in advance. If anything was at all, what's the word?
Controversial or questionable?
Yeah, questionable, or people wanted to have discussion about, we would just pull it off of the consent agenda.
Right.
And then it would all kind of get approved as one chunk, one piece, rather than going through the motions of the moving and the seconding, and, the typically, 15, sometimes even a half an hour of routine administrative matters. So it was just something that they briefed in recent board training that I went to, and it seemed like something that could help us get back some of the time in these meetings, either for further debate amongst ourselves, further time for more public comment, further time for, I would like to start inviting, I know you bring folks in, Dr. Cozad, to, introduce us to things going around, but there are sometimes I want to know more about something, and I would like to invite an individual from the district to come tell us about something. But with meetings that are already going until 10 or 10:30 at night, that's difficult.
Sure.
So.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts, good suggestions. It was good to, I thought for the session that we had with Dr. Miller-Smith to have some kind of focus away from COVID and budget for a while, because those items have consumed our discussions for a full year. And there's so much more that we really want to be talking about, and getting back to discussions about our strategic plan and where we're going and how are we doing, and what are the areas where, if we have the funding, how do we want to be able to improve the education of for our students and so forth. So it was really nice to have that opportunity to say, yeah, this is why we're here for school board in the first place, and not just to talk about COVID and the budget. Other thoughts, comments?
I would just say that the Career Center used to use a consent agenda. I don't know if they still do, because this was many years ago, but this is absolutely the truth, I swear. They did a consent agenda one time and approved the entire agenda with one vote. Now, it had to be some special kind of situation where they discussed a lot of it, or had their questions answered individually from discussions with administration or something, or maybe there wasn't much on the agenda. But that's what the treasurer told me. He said, I've never seen anything like it. They came in with one vote, approved the whole agenda, and left. Not suggesting that here.
Just for the board's consideration, I did hand out the application form here of, there was just a lot of information that was kind of fire hosed at us on that day. And to try to say, okay, well, what do we need to work on next? What are the areas that we need to kind of tackle in this Ohio Boards of Distinction application form? This would at least allow us to get our heads around what are some of the things that could be worked on as a board. So again, if it's something we want to do, or if it's just something that we want to take a look at some of these and cherry pick a few off and say we want to do this, this, and this, and we don't want to do all these. Again, to me, it's just a list of, and I don't know if Dr. Miller-Smith said this, but probably, these are things that effective boards do. So let's give them a quote award for boards that do these kind of things. And so kind of get your head around what are some of the things, because it is, like I said, fire hose kind of information. It was good. It was a lot of information. So again, whatever you want to do with that, obviously is whatever you'd like to do.
Okay.
Continue to think about it.
I'll ask board members to take a look through that and identify items which you think we might be able to start soon, things that we might want to look at later in this year, and things that we might want to look at for next year. So show short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and we can kind of summarize what our thoughts are on those items, and then start a plan of action for that.
Yeah, and of course, any type of help that you need on any of these things, like just the formal orientation process for new board members, I can obviously, do the heavy lifting on that and so forth. So,
well, the fact that as a board, we are all relatively young to this kind of role, and get the opportunity to say, when I first started, I sure would have liked to have known, X or X, Y, and Z, and maybe all the rest of the alphabet as well. So, all right. Thank you very much. Security, internet safety.
that's Mr. Bowles.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowles.
In the interest of efficiency, I'll try and keep this brief.
We'll approve that.
That's good. I just want to give you guys a little bit of information today about Securely, which is a company we contract with that provides us with a variety of internet safety products we deploy to keep our students safe when they're online, to keep our internet environment healthy in the school district. You're probably aware that federal law requires us to have certain measures in place to make sure that when students are online, they're kept safe. The Children's Internet Protection Act has been around for over 20 years now. It's nothing new. But the definition, and the law is vague enough that the definition of what it means to be safe online has changed considerably, especially in the past several years. As our students are using technology more, as they are engaging with things online more, we've had to ramp up the measures that we put in place to keep them safe and to keep the environment healthy. So it all kind of started with content filtering. Which is a very old technology, but I mean, you can't just put the internet out there in front of a student and say, all right, you're safe. We all know there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet, so you have to have something between the students and the internet to make sure that they're not being exposed to content that is objectionable, or there's a lot of other terms that are built into the law. So that's been in place for a long time. And that's where everything kind of began. But as I mentioned before, over the past several years, there's been quite a few more things that have come into our awareness as a society and as educational professionals that we need to be doing quite a bit more. And so moving on from that content filter, which we had a content filter in place for years. Our internet connection actually comes from Rebecca, our ITC, with a certain amount of filtering built into it. And that was where it started. We started adding Securely into our environment by adding their content filter on top of Rebecca's. It gave us a lot more visibility into what was going on in the environment. It let us release some things that Rebecca was blocking that we didn't agree with, but more to the point, it let us block more things than they were blocking to make sure that we were letting the internet, letting students access the internet the way that we wanted to. And that filter kind of grew into a lot of other products that we have since added to our environment through Security's Protection Suite. And I'll go through some of these kind of briefly for you, but email monitoring, that sounds a little bit more ominous than it is, but they use an artificial intelligence algorithm to scan email content. So if you have one student emailing another one with cyberbullying terms in it, we will get an alert to say, hey, you might want to go and check this out. And it's not just cyberbullying, they do this for depression, for threats of violence. There's a whole range of kind of scary things that they check for, and they do all these keyword searches and algorithm searches to see if there's anything that needs to be brought to our attention. And that happens constantly in the background. Tracking of internet searches and browsing operates the same way. If you have a student who is repeatedly going to the Suicide Lifeline or suicideprevention.org, that's concerning, and you want to make sure that that student is okay. And so they bring those things to our attention. We get alerts from these as the hours go by, if those kinds of things happen. If students are searching for things that might indicate that they're considering self-harm or harming someone else, same kind of a thing. I mentioned cyberbullying, suicide, and violence detection. That scanning is also done within our Google Drives, the students' Google Drives. So the documents that they're writing in, if you have two students who are collaborating on a document and one types something threatening in there to the other one, that doesn't just happen in a vacuum and then hope that the student reports it. Those threatening language will get picked up by the algorithm, and it will at least inform an adult within the district so that we can investigate and see if it's something that needs to be addressed in a deeper way. There's also phishing and malware protection built right in. Students are not as vulnerable to phishing as the staff members are because their email accounts are not exposed to the outside world. You can get malware anywhere. If you're on the internet, there's a chance you can get it. So we have that malware protection built in as well, just in case they browse somewhere that they don't want to be. And it tracks all those different things.
How often do you get an alert for some of those things? Is it once a month, once a year, 3 times a week, 5 times a day?
It's actually very, very frequent. On average, I get about 30 of them a day.
Wow.
But it's worth noting that a significant percentage of those are false positives. Okay. It is an artificial intelligence algorithm, so it's not perfect. It's not a human being. So what I get a lot, like the word hanging shows up a lot. Yeah. And a student will be looking for something hanging from a tree. Well, the artificial intelligence doesn't know necessarily that they're saying branch hanging from a tree or something innocent and innocuous, but it picks up the word hanging from a tree and it says, you might want to look at that. So these do come through a lot, but I would say that the majority of them are relatively innocuous. We don't get too many that are high concern areas, but I will also say that it happens more than most people would think. So it's a little bit of both. Students having access to the internet is a tremendously powerful tool, but there's a lot out there. So it's good that we put some of these things in place because we didn't know what we didn't know. And when we put it in place, it was a little eye-opening, I think, to everybody on my team, how many times these things were coming up. So it's hard to give you a definite number of how many legitimate things needed to be looked at. In general, we go through and look at behaviors more than we look at individual search cases. So if a student, because a student could be doing a project on depression among teens, and their name is going to get alerted a ton while they're doing that project. But if they've had no other instances of that, it becomes an issue of, okay, let's look at the behavior. Is this happening? Is the student in health class right now? We'll reach out to the teacher or something along those lines. So it's not cut and dry. And it is, like I said, it's just an artificial intelligence algorithm to let everybody know. So it gets you out ahead of things as much as it can. But
does this happen with the Chromebooks when they're at home, or is it only when it's on the?
That's the next slide, the 24/7 student activity monitors. That's something that we just added for this year. That's what happened through last year, I believe. So that it does happen at all times. 24/7 activity monitoring also sounds a little ominous. So it's not like there's another human being who's sitting around watching what our students are doing on their Chromebooks. It's not like that. But it does apply that same algorithm 24 hours a day. And we added this specifically to cover those time periods when the students are not here at school with us. Because we were seeing incidences like that every now and again where a student would be doing concerning searches at like 3 in the morning. And if the person getting those alerts is asleep at 3 in the morning, that's me, I'm not going to see it until, maybe I wake up the next day. Or if I don't check my email, I might not see it until much later than that. And if it's a genuinely concerning incident and I don't catch it for 8 hours or 12 hours or however much else, that's very concerning. So we added this 24/7 security service. Securely has staff of mental health professionals who kind of pick up those times when we're not looking at it. And they do the same thing. They have access to all the data that we have access to. So if a student pulls up suicide prevention hotline or something at 3 in the morning on a Saturday night, they will go and they will look at that student's entire activity profile to see if have they been looking at a lot of sites about suicide. Have they been looking at sites about depression or mental health illness, things of that nature. So they'll try and do a more holistic, look at a more holistic view to make a decision about, is this something that we need to do a wellness check right now? Is this something that we need to be calling the principal, even though it's 3 in the morning, to say, hey, a counselor needs to reach out to this student and their parents? And it's not a technology person, it's a mental health professional. So even if the students are not with us, but they are still using the technology we provide them with, we have a little bit of umbrella coverage to say, something very concerning is happening here, let's do something about it, and not wait until the next morning when maybe somebody reads the email. So that's that 24-hour activity monitoring that happens all the time, as long as the students are using our technology. We also, for this year, purchased some classroom-based device management, which lets teachers, and this has been very useful for our online teachers especially, but it lets teachers see what's happening on the device live. So they have a dashboard that they can pull up on their computer, and they can see what their students are doing on their Chromebooks live in the moment. So if you've got a couple of students who are off doing something that's not related to class, they can just close those tabs and try and get them back on task. They can push websites out, they can do a lot of different things with that.
Students really hate that.
The one that lives in my house really hates that. I'm sure he thinks that it can do way more than it really can, too.
It's an interesting product. I've enjoyed watching the teachers deploy it. Because I don't think the students always realize how much we really see. And it sounds creepy. I don't want to sound creepy, but the reality is that there is no expectation of privacy on a school-owned device.
Yeah.
And there shouldn't be. To make sure that everything is happening safely, that's the way that is. So every now and again, we have moments like that where a student is doing something and they're, how did you know that? It's like, well, you emailed him and it was all there. Like what? So that's something that we've been putting on the agenda to maybe start talking with the students more at the beginning of the year, is to make sure that everybody understands the expectations involved with that device and what all can be seen and done. So hopefully we can do that in the future as well. The last thing I wanted to mention is parental controls. This is something new we rolled out for this year as well. Securely has a home app that you can download on your mobile device. You have to opt in for it. There's a form that we have out there, the way we emailed it out to parents back in November. But it essentially gives parents a certain amount of control over their students' activity on those devices when they're at home. So they can see their students' activity feed, what the websites they're browsing to, searches that they're making. The parents can see those live on the app, and they can also set screen time management schedules. So if they don't want their student getting up at 2 in the morning and watching YouTube videos or something, the parent has the ability to lock the device down outside of school hours, so that screen time management is less of an issue. Those are all things that we've added in the past 3.5 to 4 years. So when I talked at the beginning about how the definition of being safe online has changed quite a bit, you can see how many things we have felt we needed to add to ensure that we are providing a safe environment. And it's quite a lot. Those are all things that I said we've added in the past 3.5, 4 years. And that's not going to change. As we continue to integrate technology more into our instruction, into our daily lives, these things are going to continue to come up, and there's going to be more needs as we go forward. But we take student safety very seriously. So we will continue to evolve and adapt and add services like this that let us provide a safe environment to our students, both when they're here in the district with us and also when they are at home as much as possible. Are there any other questions about Securely?
I will say, we use it at our house, or we signed up for it, and we get I think it's a weekly email that shows what my kids are looking on at school. And I was very proud, because at the end of January, the fourth grader had a lot looked up Bernie Sanders memes.
Very nice, very nice. The one thing that impressed me is, when you're talking about a lot of the things that are innocuous and so forth, but it's so good to set that alert to a low level so that you don't miss anything. It's certainly much safer to scan through and say, okay, that's not important, that's not important, that's not important. Okay, here's something that's worth taking a look at. You set it up a little bit higher to make it easier to review, and you end up with a risk of losing some of those things. So I appreciate how the settings that you're using.
And again, it just allows us to be more proactive or quickly react to situations that if we didn't know about them, they could quickly get out of control. And if we can nip them right at the beginning and address them and get the students help or discipline or whatever, whatever it is that you're not supposed to be doing on there, and then use that as a learning tool also of, hey, you shouldn't be going there, that's not appropriate, and have that conversation too. So the safety piece on a lot of fronts here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Cole.
School calendar.
Can I get a first and a second, and then I can...
Okay. The recommendation is for recommending the approval of the 2021-22 district-wide school calendar, option A. Do we have a motion to approve? Option 5, yes. We have a motion to approve it.
Okay.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. Dorn, thank you.
Again, as you can see, it's option 5, so we went through a few iterations here, and actually it was an option 6 also. So really working with SEA and SMASP on this, and really trying to end the second quarter before we went on winter break, and trying to try to accommodate that, and also have some days in here for teacher professional development conferences, some late starts, one early dismissal at the end of the year there. So again, it looks pretty similar to our past couple of calendars. Nothing really radically different.
Okay.
There's a typo. You want to know April 1st. Right.
Oh.
You see that says April 1st and April 4th on Mondays.
No, it's supposed to be the March 28th through April 1st. No school spring break. Oh, I see, yeah.
Should be Friday.
Friday, yeah, sorry.
It's one that you look at it like 100 times, and multiple people look at it. Yeah, that might have been on option 3, it was probably correct. On option 3, it got changed.
I do have one question.
Sure.
I think probably over a year ago now, we had a gentleman stand up at a board meeting and request that we do our best to line up non-standard days off with the federal holiday calendar because of the high number of both military and just federally connected, base connected families we have. And it looks like we did a good job of that, other than I was either September 17th. I don't know how set in stone this is, and I hear what you're saying, that this is option 5. So this is not something I'm held on, but September 17th or October 18th. October 11th is Columbus Day. If either of those, I don't know if those are flexible, but we do have the opportunity to flex to, so I think when that gentleman stood up, he was very well spoken, and he made some really good points. And so that seemed like one area of opportunity. Again, it is not something I am super concerned with, but when we're talking about childcare and whatnot, non-standard days off are hard for families, and if we can accommodate as many families as possible by giving them days off when their parents are already off, that might be an option.
Really, again, we did November 11th. We
Yep,
got that on
that's
there.
Veterans
That's a
Day. Yeah, Veterans
Thursday.
Day, yeah.
And Columbus Day, we did not. It really can't be Parent-Teacher Conference Day because we need to get through the end of first quarter before having parent-teacher conferences, because we have this conversation about how we did in the first quarter. We can do one of two things. We can do as is, or I can take a look at this and bring it back next time and see if we want to switch September 17th, October 11th. I just don't want to do that on the fly here.
No,
Make sure that that other things line up. Because we did do that this school year. And so as we were trying to do all those moving parts, I think we just missed the Columbus Day from all the other moving parts. So.
And it's not that I necessarily want kids to be off on Columbus Day. I love days when I'm off and my children have to go to school. I dislike personally days where they don't have to go to school and I have to go to work. It means that somebody has to take a vacation day, and I know that happens for a lot of families. But again, I'd love to hear anybody else's opinions on that. I don't know if it's worth tabling. I also know families want this calendar approved so that they can start planning their summers and their lives. So, again, just something I noticed.
I'm fine with either way. I mean, we can, I just don't want to do it on the fly tonight because I don't want to make sure I miss anything, but it would be March 11th would be the next meeting date. Then we could get it approved.
I think that's fine. Let's move it to March 11th.
Do you want to tentatively approve the rest of the calendar and then make an adjustment if feasible for, amend it next time if that's a reasonable thing to do?
It's only 2 weeks away, next meeting.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Sure.
fine with letting the community know that the major items, like first and last day of school, when it's spring break, when it's
Right.
Christmas break,
Right.
we don't intend to make any changes to, and it's just simply one day.
So it'll be September 17th or October 11th? October 12th, 11th? 11th.
I wrote down 11th, but
Okay.
I'm double checking.
That sounds right.
But yeah, for folks who want to start
Okay.
planning their
Yeah,
summer vacations or whatnot.
so we can tentatively approve it if that's
Yes.
such a thing.
Well, we can approve it and then amend it next time.
Okay. September 17th or October 11th, everything else would stay the same.
Right. So the motion stays as it is to approve as it is, knowing that we may choose to amend for Columbus Day next time, but that's a may and not necessarily will.
Okay, sure.
Should they release it as pending?
No, it would be approved. You can.
I think we either need to approve it as is. I don't know if there's a tentative approve. I think we need to approve it as is and put it back on the agenda for next month and and then change it if October 11th works out, change it at that point. Change it to September 17th to October 11th.
Okay, so we still would vote on this to approve it as it is. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Because I'm hearing.
Or we can go the other way. We can go option 7. No, I'm just kidding.
Is it okay to wait 2 weeks and just let families know that the major items on here you can plan on them informally?
Put it out as pending is what I meant, like you can put it out there, like this is pending
Yeah.
one more meeting, but they have the dates.
Sure, they'd have the dates.
This is an impacted area, and we need to offer any help we can.
I agree. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that we will table the approval of the calendar until our next meeting and readdress it,
Right.
right? So do I have a motion to table the approval?
So moved.
Mrs. Slockman,
Second.
Mrs. Dorn, Any discussion, further discussion on tabling? And I'm just trying to follow the right procedures here, everybody.
No, I'm just laughing because I'm supposed to the number tonight, apparently.
Okay, then, Mr. Lonnie, please call the roll on tabling the approval for next month.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
All right, the motion is passed to table this item until next month. All right. Did anybody sign in for open communication? Thank you, Mrs. Dorn.
No,
Okay. All right. Items of information or comments. I would like to comment on the fact that the school district had their vaccine day on the 18th. Last Thursday, there were 240 school employees who were vaccinated on that Thursday. Some of them, I know, went other places, either through public health or drug mart or whatever, to get at least their first dose. But it was a nice clinic that they had for Beaver Creek and Bellbrook, Greenview, and also the Greene County ESC. So it was a chilly day to stand out and say hi to everybody as they came in, but that's a good thing. One down, one to go for a lot of folks. Any other items of information or comments or things to share? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Mrs. Long,
Second.
Mrs. Dorn. Any discussion? All right, Mr. Lining, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mrs. Dorn,
Yes.
Mrs. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are adjourned at 8:36. The earliest we've had in ages, yes.
Yeah.